Good afternoon, everyone. My name is Art Alvarez with Mortgage Works, where we have the answers and they're on the house. Welcome to this week's Mortgage Minute, coming to you from Palm Springs in the greater Coachella Valley area. Weather here is actually pretty darn good. Nice, sunny, clear. Of course, we're warm. It's over 100 degrees, about 104, 105 last I checked. We will dip back into the 90s here in the next few days. But of course, we're pretty much beginning of the summer. I think officially that's June 21st or 2nd. And so for the most part, probably for the next 3 months, we'll be in a triple-digit temperature range until we get into the fall. So, but it's a dry heat, and most of us who've spent any time here at all have gotten pretty used to it. It can still be a beautiful place, even in that very toasty, warm weather. Usually I touch on the sports world. A couple things real quick. Man, oh man, how about those Knicks in the NBA Finals? They've won 12 playoff games in a row. Now, that's not unheard of. You may remember Golden State Warriors back in 2017 won 15 playoff games in a row, only to come up short in the final. So we'll see how that plays out. As for me, sorry, I'm rooting for the San Antonio Spurs. So I think it'll still be a very good series. I would not be surprised if it goes 7 games. Of course, this weekend we've got the finals for the French Open. Especially on the men's side, and actually even on the women's side, some of the big names are already out. So that's going to be interesting. And of course, as part of that, or not part of the French Open, but the other news this week in the tennis world is Serena Williams is going to be coming back after, I think, something like a 4-year hiatus. So that's going to be interesting. And of course, we'll definitely root for her, but no, I'm kind of wondering if that's really going to work out as well as she hoped. But we'll see. If anybody can do it, she certainly can. Last thing I'll mention is this weekend, one of my favorite events, the Formula One Grand Prix of Monaco. That's this weekend. I was fortunate enough to actually attend that event way back when. I'm going to date myself. Back in 1990, I attended that event, and it was a terrific experience. And of course, that was back in what I consider part of the heyday of Formula One, at least in modern times. Ayrton Senna, in fact, was in that race and won it. Some other big names like Alain Prost and Nigel Mansell and Riccardo Patrese and Gerhard Berger and and so forth. It was really an interesting time at Formula One. So if you ever have a chance to check out that event, I encourage you to do. Just if nothing else, Monaco itself is just a very beautiful and very interesting place to visit, and so I would encourage you to do that if you find the time. So let's go ahead and give you an update on the bond market and the interest rate market. We'll start with the interest rates. We always like to show you our interest rate grid that's right on the homepage of our website. There it is. And it's just more of the same. The media will have you believe that we're approaching a 6.5 rate for a conforming loan. We're better than that. We're at 6.25. And that's typically what you'll find if you check with us to get a rate quote, is that we're generally going to be about 0.25% better than what you see in the headlines or what the news is broadcasting. And across the board, again, conforming loans, 30-year fixed 6.25, the buy downs 3.2121, so you can get you starting in the 3s or 4s. FHA VA continues to be right there in the 5s, 5 and 5/8 for FHA, 5 3/4 for VA, and the jumbos are hanging in there right around 6%. So again, just more of the same. And I always say that having this kind of stability in rates is actually a good thing, better than them jumping around, because that creates all kinds of anxieties and makes it more difficult for you to decide when to lock in a rate. Jeff's going to pull up the chart of the 10-year bond yield. It's a chart for the last 5 days. And actually what's good about it is we've had a little bit of improvement. We're about where we were at last week. Again, this is a 5-day chart going back to last Friday. Early this week, we got a little bit spooked because, of course, you can see that that big increase. And then, of course, that dip that Jeff likes to see was a little early this week. It was Tuesday, not Wednesday, then gradually going up. But at least we came back off of that peak earlier in the week where we went over 450. In fact, we were approaching 460. So that's helped keep rates in line. As you can see there, the yield right now, 4.47. So in that respect, what's going on in the markets that are causing, the bond yields to be where they're at and so forth. So let's kind of touch on some data points, as to what's making the market move. I got to tell you, the economic data seems pretty darn good to me. I'm continuing to be fascinated about what I think is a little bit of a disconnect between the economic data and consumer sentiment, and the polling that says most people are dissatisfied with the economy. A lot of the data suggests otherwise. The S&P U.S. Manufacturing Purchasing Managers Index and the Institute of Supply Manufacturing Index, those are both mouthfuls. This week they came out up from previous months. So that's interesting that manufacturing seems to be doing pretty well. JOLTS, the job opening labor turnover survey, a big surge, 7.6 million job openings. That was previously 6.9. It's the highest in 2 years. So that tells you the labor market's actually doing pretty well. Factory orders, U.S. factory orders, biggest gain in 11 months. Just amazing. And then when you look at the ADP May employment survey, again, ADP is a payroll processing company. They do a survey of new jobs, private sector jobs created, and they came in at 122,000. Now they can be kind of off at times. It's not my favorite survey or index, but if these numbers prove to be true, 122 is pretty strong, especially since the forecast was 110,000 new jobs. So ADP is saying it came in better than forecast. And then tomorrow really is the biggest data to happen this week is the employment report. Now that report comes from the U.S. Bureau of Labor Statistics. And again, what's being forecast looks pretty darn good. 80,000 new jobs. So that's lower than ADP. So let's hope that the Bureau comes in with a higher number, closer to ADP. Unemployment rate is forecast to stay the same at 4.3. And then U.S. hourly wages at 0.3%. Now that's a monthly number, but if you extrapolate it out, that's about a 3.6% annual growth rate in wages. Well, guess what, folks? That's an indication that wages are continuing to grow faster than inflation. So people should be experiencing net some increased purchasing power despite all the complaining about high prices for groceries and gas and so forth. So when you look at all that, again, I'm a little bit mystified. The data says the economy is good. Of course, the stock market continues to roar along. Earnings are great in terms of those companies that are part of the Dow. So all of that's good news. We got to help folks get sort of a more positive outlook and help them realize that maybe things are not as bad as they think they are. So with that, of course, I can see Jeff is back up with us. What we're going to talk about today is, last couple of weeks, we were talking about equity lending. And we were talking about, the types of equity loans that are available. And of course, the focus there is homeowners who continue to want to hold on to those 2 and 3% mortgages, and yet they've experienced a great deal of equity improvement, especially since 2019. And they may be at a point where the home's not quite serving them as much as it did. They may want to, if they're not going to sell and buy a bigger, nicer, better home, et cetera, what can they do to access their equity? So we spent the last couple of weeks talking about that particular homeowner profile, but we thought this week what we're going to do is we're going to shift more to the senior homeowner. And the reason for that is we need to understand that they have different financial goals. They have a different financial situation. And so they can actually at times find it more difficult to access their equity when in fact they may have even a greater need than that younger homeowner who's got lots of equity but has that 2.5% mortgage. They may have needs that they feel are compelling too, but the senior homeowner in particular can be in a very interesting and somewhat challenging situation when they get to be of retirement age and they want to access their equity. So that's really what we want to cover today to help folks out there who are senior homeowners realize that they really do have some very good options. Hey there, Jeff.
Hey, Art. Sorry, I popped on a little early. You piqued my interest with a couple of things, but one of the things that I've heard you say in the past is, the HELOC, HELoan, they're good ideas, but they're not always like as easy to qualify for as everybody else. And it seems like when you get to that 65 or 62 and older, the conditions change even more, don't they?
Well, they do. A lot of folks, once you get to that age, you may be at a point where you do want to retire. Or in some cases, I hate to say it, but I have seen examples of this. You may be at a point where you don't want to retire, you can't retire, but you may have had a change in your income. You may have gotten laid off at your job and you're trying to find another one. You may have been cut back in terms of what you're doing work-wise and in terms of hours and so forth. So it's just more common that when you start to get closer to that 62 plus age, that more often that homeowner is going to have a different financial profile than they may have had 20 or 30 years earlier. And that can be a real challenge when it comes to the traditional HELOCs and HELOANs that we've been talking about the last couple of weeks, because the qualifying criteria for those is much more like the traditional first mortgage, where we've got to document sufficient income and calculate debt ratios and so forth. Senior homeowners sometimes, in fact, pretty often now, can find that to be quite a bit more of a challenge, particularly not just because maybe their income is different, i.e. lower, but maybe because of that, the debt side of their balance sheet, if you will, suddenly doesn't look so good. They may have incurred a lot of debt, in some cases, frankly, just to live on. And so that brings a whole unique set of circumstances that we need to address as mortgage lenders and give them, viable ways to attack that problem and get them better situated financially for the remaining, hopefully, many retirement years they have ahead of them.
I'm looking forward to this conversation today, because it seems like as people transition into that, homeowners, specifically senior homeowners, at that point they probably have this situation where they have this wealth, but it's tied up in their home. And then, as you say, you have the challenges of like, hey, you know what? I've retired, my income has gone down, and all of a sudden my income to debt ratio is very, very different. Right. And all of a sudden it feels like it's behind locked doors that nobody has the combination to. So I'm excited to talk about this today.
Right. Yep, exactly right.
Well, let's dive in.
Yeah, let's get into the talking points here. Again, of course, you can see the headline. So wait, what are the equity access options for senior homeowners? Well, again, senior homeowners face a whole different set of challenges. And the first one is what I basically just talked about, which is many retirees have significant equity, but they're more limited on income. I mean, that's a real issue, and we see it pretty frequently. And again, as I just also commented, a traditional HELOC or HELOAN are going to rely on the typical income documentation, debt ratio calculation that oftentimes a senior homeowner is not able to, meet. And it's interesting because one of the things I've seen is there's a tendency for homeowners to kind of have the mindset that getting an equity loan. And this is true whether it's the case where they have an existing, mortgage, first mortgage, or even if their property is free and clear, they have a tendency to think or have the mindset that getting an equity loan is going to be pretty easy, that it's not going to be as difficult to qualify because after all, they have all this equity. And especially if they have a good credit score, then they can be very surprised in a negative way when they go to Bank of America and like, I want a HELOC. And they find out and they walk out the branch office disappointed because they got told that they don't qualify. And oftentimes it's because the loan officer went through their information and determined their income wasn't sufficient enough to meet the debt ratio. And with a HELOC in particular, that can be an issue because a HELOC, remember, as we talked the last couple of weeks, that's an adjustable rate mortgage. So as is true with all adjustable rate mortgages for the most part, you don't qualify at your initial start rate. For qualifying purposes, to take into account the risk associated with having an adjustable rate loan, most HELOC lenders are going to qualify you on a formula that is typically take the start rate, add 2% to that. And then your debt ratio is calculated off of that 2% higher qualifying rate. That can be a problem because after all, you're maybe already on limited income. And of course, you're going to get a worksheet or something that shows you what the HELOC payment's going to be if you fully draw the loan. But then you realize that payment you're seeing is not what you're going to be your debt ratio is going to be calculated on, it's going to be considerably higher because they're going to add 2%. Again, the idea is to make sure that homeowner is going to have the ability to repay in a rising interest rate scenario. So again, that's part of the ability to repay rules that came into play in 2010. That can be an obstacle for the senior homeowner. And in fact, quite often the inquiries we get for a reverse mortgage and so forth are usually because somebody tried to go to another lender, get a HELOC, and they ended up getting told, no, you don't have enough income. Your debt ratio is too high.
Well, the next point I'm interested in, because, you know, this is so different than a lot of probably people you talk to, is when you do talk to them, the senior homeowner, they're not a situation where they have a little bit of equity, they have a lot of equity. Mm-hmm. And again, that's the mindset of like, I have all this equity, how can I get it out that I can use it?
Well, and that's the thing. Now, one thing I'll point out to you is, yes, in most cases, they're less concerned about building equity, but not always. Mm. You know, I've run into homeowners, senior homeowners, who have lots of equity or the home's free and clear, and they still resist the idea of accessing their equity, even when you look at their entire financial profile after I interview them and kind of get a clear picture of where they are financially. They can still be resistant because they are, I would argue in some cases, overly focused on protecting that equity for their heirs. And right. That can be a counterbalance to what otherwise you would normally think. You're 75 years old, your home's free and clear. It might be worth $1 million. Well, gosh, you're not worried about building more equity, are you? You're probably in a situation where you need to access that equity, but not always. Every so often, I'll run into a homeowner who's maybe in that situation and they're still resistant. And in part, they're thinking about, you know, their heirs, their kids usually, or maybe their grandkids. And unfortunately, in some cases, that concern isn't necessarily coming from the homeowner. It's coming from the heirs, maybe from the kids who suddenly go, hey, Mom, what about us? No, we don't think a reverse mortgage is a good idea because we want that equity to be there when you pass and you're going to give it to us. I hate to say it, but that is sometimes a factor out there. But otherwise, yeah, I mean, basically the idea in most cases is, yeah, senior homeowners are less concerned about building more equity because they already have a lot. And they're more concerned, most importantly, about cash flow and liquidity for sure. And then, of course, if they have retirement assets, they don't want to necessarily tap into those, particularly if they're fully invested in the market, when they have all this equity sitting over here in the home that they can access when needed. So as a consequence, these kind of options for senior homeowners that we're going to talk about, I think, are well suited to attack exactly those goals.
Yeah, because it feels like this first slide and the first bit of conversation, it's almost like for senior homeowners, the starting line has moved further out and making it more difficult. So I'm excited to hear what you have to say. Like, hey, you know what? Yes, and there are better options.
Right. So yeah, the first thing, and again, what we're going to talk about here on this particular, the HECM line of credit. Now, HECM, just to remind everybody, that's a home equity conversion mortgage. That's the technical name of the most prominent reverse mortgage product in the U.S. And it's an FHA loan, as we've mentioned before, but a lot of folks are surprised to hear that. So this is not a second mortgage. This is a first mortgage. And it can be arranged on the senior homeowner's home, whether the home is free and clear, or if they have an existing first mortgage. If they do have an existing first mortgage, and if we determine a HECM is a good option for them, that first mortgage is going to have to be paid off. And again, that can be an issue if the rate is low. But nonetheless, I want to talk about this specifically because of the line of credit feature. And so here are the criteria. It's available if you're 62 years of age or older. By the way, we do have access to some other proprietary reverse mortgage products. They're not HECM FHA loans. They're a proprietary non-FHA product that also does provide a line of credit option. And you don't have to be 62. You can be as young as 55. Now, again, the core feature of the HECM loan is you do not have to make payments. And I always stress you do not have to. You can if you want to. because some folks really get concerned about that equity starting to be lost from interest accruing on the loan after they get it because they're not making payments. You're not forced to. That's not a rule like, oh, you're going to violate the loan terms if you make a payment. Not true at all. You can make a payment if you want to. But the real benefit is you don't have to, and that can come in really handy in those senior years. And you can pick and choose. If you're going through a period where you're good financially, don't make payments. Or you go ahead and make payments. Or otherwise, if you're struggling, then you don't have to make payments. So the point is you can kind of toggle between those choices anytime you want.
Art, as I understand, before we go the next point, as I understand that the whole mathematical formulation for a HECM or a reverse mortgage is quite conservative. So if someone chose not to, make payments, I think in my mind the thought is eventually the house, I'm going to owe more than the home is worth. Can you talk us through that just a little bit?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. Again, for the HECM reverse mortgage, you have to be 62 to be eligible. Now, if you're married and you meet that, you're 62, but your spouse is 55, you can still get the loan. But here's how it works. Yeah, because the calculation of the loan amount is not at all like a traditional forward first mortgage. It's not like you can go to 90% of value or 80% of value or 75% of value. It doesn't work like that at all. Instead, the loan amount you can get is going to be based on your age. And of course, the younger you are, the less loan amount you can get to protect the homeowner from the loan growing too fast and at a speed where it's going to exceed your life expectancy. And of course, that calculation is further going to address if, again, you're married and you have a spouse younger than 62. Then your loan amount's not going to be based on the older of the two people. It's going to be based on the younger, which is going to drive your available loan amount even more. And again, but that's for your protection in order to make sure that there's going to be less of a likelihood that if you don't make payments throughout the life of the loan, that it's not going to grow so fast that it's going to exceed your value in a relatively short period of years. Even in the best case, when we're arranging a reverse mortgage for somebody who's like 80 or 85, which of course in the U.S., when you get to be that age, you've already exceeded the median life expectancy of a citizen in this country, right?
Right.
But nonetheless, you would think, oh, well, if I'm already past normal life expectancy, I'm 85, I should get 90% of my home's value, right? No. Best case, you might get to 50, maybe 55. We just closed one for a homeowner in LA. She's 100 years old.
Oh my gosh.
And, and the loan we got for her was just about 60% of her value. So yes, that's a very good thing to understand is the basic concept is the older you are, the more money you're going to get. But again, at most, you're going to look at somewhere between maybe 20 to 50, at most, maybe 60% of your value. It's rare that you're going to go any further than that.
And that's the way they protect the value versus the loan amount.
Correct.
Gotcha. All right. Well, good. Let's keep going through here.
Well, we'll come back to that a little bit later as to why that should not be a worry. But go ahead.
I love the next one because that's always the stigma is, well, and I know it's old, it's been outdated, and you're going to share this, but the fact that, hey, I don't own my home anymore if I do a reverse mortgage.
Well, yeah, and I chuckle because, believe it or not, after all, the reverse mortgages have been around now for 40 years. And yet there is still this myth out there that when you get this kind of loan, you no longer own your home. And it is completely untrue. In fact, for those senior homeowners that I encounter and have the fortune to talk to them about the product, and in cases where they have an existing mortgage, I'll ask them. I say, well, tell me something. When you got your Fannie Mae loan for that has a $250,000 balance at 2.5%, did it occur to you that maybe by getting that loan you wouldn't own the home anymore? And they said, well, no. Why would I think that? And of course, my response is precisely. Because when you got that first mortgage, what we call a forward mortgage, what is the lender's interest in your home at that point? Well, they have a secured interest in your property, because the loan, the actual deed of trust, is going to be recorded against your property. So from that perspective, they have a secured interest in your home, but that doesn't give them ownership of your home. If you make the payments and you otherwise meet the requirements of the loan, so that you are not in default, you own the home. So I have to remind folks or explain to them that a reverse mortgage, when it closes, it's going to have a deed of trust, just like their current loan does. It's going to be recorded against the house, just like their current loan is. The sole difference really is the reverse. Make a payment if you like, or not. The first mortgage you have now, you got to make a payment every month, or you default and you will lose your home. The bank will take it. But with the reverse mortgage, you don't have to make the payment, and the lender's not going to take your home because you're allowed to not make the payment. It's your choice.
I like that. Well, I have to, full disclosure, I mean, you created a reverse mortgage for my wife and I, and this particular point was the one that she's like, no, because she'd heard it from all her friends and her clients. And I'm like, it's not true. And it was like, it was an uphill battle. So that was a big thing. Yep. All right, let's go to the next one. Funds can be accessed only when needed. What does that mean?
Yeah, the unique feature of well, it's actually not just a unique feature of the HECM line of credit. It's true with a traditional HELOC. The beauty of a HELOC is that, it's a revolving line of credit. I call it similar to a credit card secured by your home. And of course, what does a credit card provide you? The ability to access funds when you need them. Of course, up until the time you've maxed out the credit card and you have no access beyond that. But assuming that that's not the case, a line of credit, whether it's a HECM or a traditional, gives you that ability to access funds only when you need it. Now, with most traditional HELOCs these days, most lenders will not let you get that loan without taking an initial draw, because they learned the hard way that making HELOC loans to homeowners, and we used to do this years ago, they would let us arrange a HELOC. It gets recorded against the home, and the homeowner would choose not to draw at all. So it'd just be sitting there dormant, not being used. Lenders don't really allow that for a traditional HELOC. They'll force you to take some money at closing, and then they're going to bet that you're not going to turn around and return it all right away. And they're doing that because they're trying to earn a yield, because they don't make any money if they do all the what I call their back office expenses to underwrite and fund the loan. And if you sit there with that HELOC, that line of credit, and you don't use it, then they don't make any money. It's a loss for them. So, but again, overall, though, the point is, even if you're forced to do that on the traditional HELOC, and certainly with the HECM line of credit, you can choose to only access it when you need it. And the beauty of that is, if you don't need it right away and you're not accessing it, you're not incurring interest cost. And so, particularly on the HECM side, if you maybe get a HECM, and after you've paid what's called your mandatory obligations, which is the closing costs, the mortgage insurance, and an existing mortgage, if you have one, you can set up the remaining portion of the loan all as a line of credit. You don't have to draw on it at all. And so the interest that's accruing is not at all based on that big remaining amount of line of credit. It's only based on the mandatory obligations that you borrowed when you got the loan, the closing costs and your existing first. So that's a benefit. Your loan's not going to grow super fast if after you've gotten the loan and you've got this huge line of credit sitting there and you're not accessing it because you don't need the money right away. That's great, because you're avoiding the interest cost of that remaining portion.
Art, so far it sounds like it pays to get older. It's actually going to turn out okay.
Well,
this
yeah.
next, yeah,
it can. There you go. Interest accrues only on funds actually borrowed. And I can't stress that enough, because, it's been several weeks ago. I had quoted John Wooden, and he's famous for one of his many famous sayings was, when opportunity presents itself, it's too late to prepare. And that's what I stress with folks who are, senior homeowners, very low first mortgage or no first mortgage at all. And they're like, nah, not interested. I don't need the money. I'm too worried about losing my equity, blah, blah, blah. I'm like, you got to realize, you got to take into account that saying that John Wooden was right. When opportunity presents itself, it's too late to prepare. Or to change that a little bit, when a challenge, a financial challenge, presents itself, it can be too late to prepare for that. So one of the things senior homeowners need to understand is, while things all may look great and rosy and your health is good and you got a lot of money in your retirement accounts and fully invested in the market, you're feeling like, I'm sitting pretty, I don't need this. Well, you're going to oftentimes be surprised. A day will come when suddenly you need it, and you need it really badly. And you could be scrambling to get this done at that time for maybe a variety of reasons. Why not do it now, even when you feel like you're sitting pretty and couldn't be better off financially? If you've got the equity, why not put that equity into a vehicle that you can then tap into when you need it? I can't stress that enough. And too many senior homeowners don't think through that and realize it's a strategic tool. It's not just a last minute, I'll go after it when I need it, because a lot of times that's too late.
Well, that's such a strong point that as you were saying, I'm like, oh, geez, I think I'm kind of guilty of that. Often I'll go to my bank and they'll say, hey, Jeff, you should think about having a line of credit. I'm like, I don't need it. I said, I paid for my own business and blah, blah, blah. And they said, well, that's not the point. And I kind of like listen, but don't listen.
Right.
And you just drove that point home. It's like, it's nice to have, if you think about it, it's nice to have that credit card that you never use, but you could use in case of an emergency or, quite frankly, an opportunity. So maybe I have to revisit that thought, Art. Thank you.
Exactly right. Yeah.
Let's go to this next one. I think this is important. Is you talked about some of the unique benefits.
Yeah. And again, in particular, what we've got on this particular slide is it's about the HECM line of credit. What folks don't realize, and this is unlike a traditional line of credit, the HELOC line of credit, the unused portion grows over time.
Wait a minute. Can you, that sounds like, okay, it's not a plant that we're just watering. So how does it grow over time, Art?
It's the way the product is designed. As in my earlier example, you get a HECM reverse mortgage. Maybe you got a $150,000 existing mortgage. You're going to pay that off. You're going to pay the closing costs. So maybe at the time the loan closes, you need $200,000 to cover everything. But based on your age and value of the home, you may have $400,000 left over. Maybe your home's worth, $1.5 million. Well, you don't need that money right away. You don't want to set up monthly payments to pull the money. You say, I just want the rest of the line of credit. And so when the loan closes, you got $400,000 sitting there. Again, the first benefit is no interest cost on that because you haven't used it.
Okay.
But then what happens to that $400,000 limit? Each year it goes up, typically by 4 to 5%.
Are you talking about just natural growth of the value of the property is the reason it goes
up? Well, it's not necessarily about the value of the property. It's just the line of credit itself will go up. The limit will go up, typically at a rate approximating what your interest is on the loan. Okay. So you're going to see that line of credit starts at 400 and it's zero balance. Next year, it could go to 410. Year after, it could go to 418. So the point is, again, you've prepared. You've decided we're going to go ahead and get this loan. We don't really have a compelling, huge financial need right now, but we want to prepare for the future, because there come a time where maybe income gets disrupted, our financial assets may, take a hit for some reason. Maybe we have a, God forbid, a 20% stock market correction, whatever. Well, by then, at that later time, you could be scrambling to grab that equity that you have now. Why not get it again? Put some of that equity, the most you can get based on your age, get it into a vehicle now that you're not paying interest on yet, and then this unique benefit is that limit that's initially 400 is going to grow. So eventually you may not have just 400 to tap into. It could, depending on how many years in the future, it could go to 450 or 500. That is a terrific benefit that a traditional HELOC doesn't give you at all. So that's why I stress that over and over and over again for folks who are still on the fence about whether to do it. Because as the other bullet points show, you've now got a growing emergency reserve. it provides you protection and increased protection for unexpected healthcare costs. It can help you reduce the need to have to liquidate your money that might be fully invested in your IRA and so forth, or in times where we have a market correction and maybe you've been pulling money out of your IRA to help live on. You can stop doing that and then tap into that line of credit until such time the stock market reverses course and gets back to normal, quote unquote. And so again, the real point is at the bottom, provides flexibility without requiring homeowners to take funds that they don't currently need. So it's a strategic tool to access when you really do need it. Again, it gives you that opportunity to not have to, basically it's a function of you've made the plan to address a future financial challenge so that you're not scrambling to do that when the challenge hits you in the face.
Well, I love the way you're talking about this, Art, because you're kind of reframing it from my last resort to a strategic, this is my first move, and it's there. So it makes decision making, it's almost like one of those things, whenever we're panicking, that's a terrible time to make decisions. And when you're under that kind of pressure, whether it's financial or health or whatever that is, you have that already done. So I love the idea of reframing this from the last resort to your first move.
Exactly right, because when you get to be older in your years, surprises can be very unsettling and create a great deal of stress and anxiety. Wouldn't it be great to position yourself to deal with that in a much more calm manner and have the resources available pretty much on a moment's notice to get the funds you need to face that challenge and do so in a much less stressful way? It's something I can't stress enough. And every time I get a homeowner who's like hesitant, I'm pretty successful in getting them to realize, yeah, you're right. I'm not going to wait till I need this as a last resort. I need to reshape my thinking and make this a financial tool that I get earlier, not later.
Well, without, beating this horse, it's almost like saying it's good to go in and get a checkup once a year, because if you catch something and you catch it early, you can take care of it. Don't wait till you're saying, oh yeah, I can't move, I get this pain in my stomach. And you had that pain 2 years ago. And it finally got so bad you couldn't deal with it. And now it's maybe too late, for goodness sake. So I love that. Again, I love the reframing idea.
Yeah. And the other point about the line of credit growing over time, it's not so much about the potential increase in home value. It's about the fact you're getting older, right? Remember, I said the older you are, the more money you can get. Well, if you think about it, it's kind of rational, right? It's kind of makes sense. If you've got that line of credit sitting there unused and every year you're getting older, well, why not be able to access more of that? Because after all, you're getting older and you're getting closer to that life expectancy date in the future. And because all of this is based on actuarial tables, right? Yeah. So that's why it makes sense that these grow over time, whereas a traditional, HELOC when you're 35 or 40 doesn't grow at all.
Well, this next one, the HECM line of credit has protection, traditional HELOCs don't. What is that all about?
Well, very good point. The thing about a traditional HELOC is you can end up with some situations where suddenly, even if you think you've got unused credit on the line of credit, you are prevented from accessing it.
Oh, really?
What most folks don't realize, when you get a home equity line of credit, you're not a senior homeowner, you buried in your loan docs, the lender has a unilateral right to freeze the account, lower the credit limit, or restrict the use of it based on market conditions. We all remember the Great Recession of 2008, right?
Yeah.
Well, back those days, it was routine. I would arrange a purchase loan. Maybe the borrower had a big down payment, and we would say, hey, why don't you let us put a line of credit on your home when you purchase the house? We'll put it behind your first mortgage. And again, that was an emergency fund. It would just sit there unused. And of course, what happened? We have the Great Recession of 2008. Homeowners were now starting to feel or face a reduction in their home value, a collapse of their home value, if you will, maybe loss of income. And it was like, well, I'll grab my line of credit and get money there. Oh, they go to use it, frozen.
Wow.
Why? Because the HELOC lender, those HELOCs are allowed to be restricted, or essentially frozen if the lender determines you've had a drop in your market value of your home.
Mm-hmm.
A traditional HELOC does that. The HECM line of credit does not. You're not going to have that loan frozen or restricted or the limit reduced, even if the value of the home goes down 5 years from now.
Or the loan called in.
No.
Okay.
Yep. Yeah, that line of credit is going to remain, even if your home drops in value. And yeah, this next one, they generally cannot be reduced simply because the property value declines, as I just said. So the idea here is that is a terrific protection feature that the HECM line of credit. So those senior homeowners, they might be 70 years old. In fact, I talked to someone yesterday morning in our weekly caravan meeting, and he's older. He's a realtor, and he's like 73 years old. And he said he and his wife are talking about accessing equity, but they don't want to do a reverse mortgage. They want to get a traditional HELOC. Now, I haven't had a chance to get into that conversation in more detail with him, but what he's not thinking about is there's some risk there, because he cannot bet on for sure that if he goes that direction, gets a traditional HELOC, that at some point in the future his access to it could be restricted based on what happens in the market. So that's a risk that senior homeowners need to understand if they're going to look at a traditional HELOC versus a HECM line of credit.
Well, this next one, a dear friend of mine, when his father passed, he had a reverse mortgage on his father's home for maybe 3 or 4 years prior to that to help with some of the costs associated with your parents getting old. He was in his late 90s. And he did something that was very interesting, and it's this next one. The loan is non-recourse. Share with us what that means and how that could be a benefit.
Yeah, it is the fundamental feature of a reverse mortgage. Now, it is part of the reason why the FHA HECM reverse mortgage has mortgage insurance, and many homeowners perceive it as being very expensive to the point where they think it's so expensive the loan program is not worth talking about, because it's basically 2%. Now, it's interesting, in a regular FHA loan, the upfront mortgage insurance premium is 1.75%. And yet we do a lot of FHA loans for home buyers. You don't have to be a first timer. And yet when you look at the senior homeowner and they're looking at a HECM, it's like, 2%, that's too much, because it's going to be based on the home value or the max loan amount in your county, one of the two. But it is an integral part of the program, and it's for, and I know it's a cliche, it's for your protection. And the reason it is this non-recourse feature. To translate that means if you get that reverse mortgage, and let's say you're 75 and you live to be 95, well, over that span of years, you could, and if you haven't made any payments on it, even though you're allowed to, that loan amount's going to grow substantially over time. And it conceivably will, and the disclosures that are provided to homeowners will show that conceivably at some point in the future, like when you're getting close to 100, the balance on the loan may exceed your home value. Not to worry, because let's say you pass, your heirs are now going to get the house, and it's got negative equity. The family is not required to cover that. It is forgiven. That's what non-recourse means. So again, whether you get a HELOC and you've used it all and you're not making payments and it's growing over the time, or again, you just got a traditional HECM and you didn't even get a line of credit, you just pulled all the money out and you're not making the payments, so interest is accruing. If you get to that delta where your home value is less than your balance, whether you're still alive or if you've passed and your home has gone to your heirs, neither one of you are responsible for that negative balance. That's why the mortgage insurance is there, because the lender in that scenario, when they get the house, because if it has negative equity, you should just deed the property back to the house. Why try to sell it because it's got negative equity? You're allowed to deed it back to the lender. Then the lender submits a claim to HUD, Housing and Urban Development, which is the parent organization for FHA. They submit a claim to HUD to get reimbursed for that negative balance.
So nobody loses.
Nobody loses.
Well, in that scenario I was telling you about, my friend, when his father passed, the lender called him and he said, "Where do you want me to send the keys?" And he put the keys in an envelope and sent them back to him. Done.
Right.
Nothing they had to do. It was a pretty clean thing.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, let's go to the next one. What if you love your existing low mortgage rate? This is, I think, quite frankly, this was our situation. My wife and I said, hey, we have this really low rate that Art got us, and I'm not really excited about giving it away.
Right. Yeah, and that's a common issue. We do have senior homeowners who are pretty well off financially. A lot of times, though, that means in retirement accounts, the money's fully invested. They don't really want to touch that nest egg, but they yet may have a need for some funds. And usually in that scenario, it's not so much just as a rainy day type of a fund, more about they have a specific need. It could be healthcare costs. It could be maintenance and repairs, to the home. It could be something positive, like we want to build an ADU, or we want to, access funds to give to our, children to buy a home. So the point is, what do you do in that circumstance? Well, we have a reverse mortgage product. There it is. It's called a Home Safe Second. And that's a product that we use for homeowners who do have that first mortgage rate between 2 and 4 in particular. Again, they don't want to access their other funds, but they have a need. The problem, as it shows, traditional HECM generally require you to pay off your existing mortgage, but many seniors don't want to do that. So what the alternative is the Home Safe Second. So it's a traditional second mortgage, and it's a fixed rate loan. Now, unlike a line of credit, you get all the money in a lump sum. You're not going to access it, in the future. If you don't use it right away, you get all the money at once. So in that respect, it's a traditional equity loan. But again, the key feature is you don't make payments unless you want to. If you don't make payments, the loan's going to grow over time, just like the HECM does. But again, if you want to make payments, you can. So this becomes that really good alternative for that senior homeowner who's got that low rate mortgage. They're paying it comfortably, but they want a good amount of money for a specific use. That's where this particular product comes in.
I'm just curious, Art. Okay, so let's say, for instance, and again, I'll use myself as the example, we have a first that has a low interest rate. And do I still see potentially some growth because I'm paying down one loan while the other one is growing? And of course, then there's also potential for appreciation of property. So I'm still kind of getting some of that I would have gotten in a HECM.
Well, true, because if you keep that existing first mortgage at 2.5, and let's say you've had that loan for several years. Well, of course, if it's 2.5, you probably had that loan for about 5 years, right? Or about 6 years, during the pandemic. Well, one of the beauties of having such a low rate on your first mortgage is you have a bigger chunk of that total principal and interest payment paying down principal. And each year you go on, you're paying down even more principal. So yeah, when you get the Home Safe Second, and if you choose not to make payments, yes, that's growing. But concurrent with that, your first mortgage at that 2.5 rate is dropping in balance because you have a good portion of your monthly principal and interest payment going toward principal, not interest, because the interest rate is low. So that helps. That plus the fact that homes generally historically appreciate about 4% per year. You put all that together, and you're not going to probably see as much of an increase or I should say, a decrease in your equity than you otherwise would. Now you can argue that, well, you're going to still have a decent amount of reduction in your equity because with the Home Safe Second, you get all the money at once. With the HECM line of credit, again, after the mandatory obligations of closing costs and paying off an existing first mortgage, if there is one, and if you get the line of credit and you don't access it right away, then you're going to be better off in terms of your equity dropping because you're not using the line of credit right away.
Art, I'm gonna have a line of T-shirts and hats made. Gray is the new green. I love this. It sounds like it's going to be a good going forward for us gray-haired people.
Right, exactly. So again, we just basically covered the Home Safe Second's unique advantage is it allows you as a senior homeowner. And again, that's the other point. You only have to be 55. You don't have to be 62, unlike the HECM. So you only need to be 55. And so that's a very unique feature, the lower age limit and the fact that it allows you to keep your second mortgage, your first mortgage if you have a low rate. So that's another reason why this can be a really good option for somebody who's approaching retirement age and has that low rate first mortgage doesn't want to touch it, but needs to get that access to equity.
Well, it sounds like it also that situation where you were saying before, it's the equity is based on the younger spouse, but if you're both 55 and 57, there's not as much of a penalty for the younger spouse.
Exactly right. Yeah, allows you to keep your existing first. Yes, provides access through the reverse mortgage second lien. Again, you can make payments if you want to, not required, but if you want to, you can. And you continue to make your first mortgage payment. So again, that's where you get that opportunity to still be paying down some of your principal on the first, even if that second mortgage is growing because you're not making payments on that.
I love it. Again, gray is the new green.
Right. So again, it solves the primary problem for the senior homeowner who has a low rate first mortgage and they don't want to touch it. That's what the Home Safe Second is all about. That's exactly what it's designed to do. And we're having very good luck with it. Because again, what we're finding is a lot of homeowners approaching retirement age, they're 55 to 62 range. They think they want an equity loan or a traditional HELOC, but we always take an opportunity to show them this option as well. And we're having pretty good success with it because it's a pretty good loan in the sense the rate's pretty good, $8.99 fixed rate. You know exactly what your rate is for the life of the loan. You don't have to pay it off on any specific term like 5 years or 10 years or 15 or 20. It just sits there for as long as you want until you no longer own the home or you pass away. So for those reasons, we oftentimes will get somebody who's like late 50s and wants a HELOC traditional. And then when we show them this, fairly often now we get them saying, oh yeah, this is a better idea. I'll take this one instead.
I want to ask one question we haven't covered. I don't think we're covering in the next few questions. Is you said this stays in place until you pass, but what if you're married? Does that mean the other person has to leave? They lose a place to live, or what's that all about?
No, just like the FHA HECM reverse mortgage. That was a change that was made several years ago. So the idea is, yes, the loan amount you can get is going to be based on the age of the youngest spouse. But, and of course, statistically, the older of the two is probably going to pass first, but the younger spouse, not to worry, because the loan was made to both of you and the loan amount was based on the younger of the two spouses, then that surviving spouse who was younger is able to continue to live in the home and is able to continue to enjoy the features of either the HECM LOC or the Home Safe Second. They're not going to get kicked out of the house. They're not going to lose the house.
That's a positive.
Very big positive, yes.
Well, let's talk about, now it's kind of wrapping up, which option might be better?
Yeah, the HECM line of credit, as you can see there, is it better? Yes, if you want maximum flexibility. If you want future access to funds, if you want to eliminate an existing first mortgage, if you think that's beneficial. Obviously, if it's 2.5, you probably don't think so, unless you're having trouble making the payment because your income dropped too much. And because, by the way, both these programs, you don't qualify in the traditional manner with the debt to income ratio and all that. So if eliminating an existing mortgage is to your benefit, that's another feature. And then again, creating a long-term retirement reserve that you don't accrue interest on until you actually draw the money. So that's why a HECM line of credit would be the better option.
You did a program now, it's been some time, but you were talking about, I think the number was like 70% of seniors retired age. Their number one concern is outliving the money. And this seems like this helps bridge that gap. It's
exactly what it's there for. Exactly. Because, people are living longer, even though we're being told that we eat bad and we're, they just recently flipped the food pyramid and we're trying, our Health and Human Services Secretary is trying to get us to eat better and all that. Well, despite all the bad things we do to ourselves, we're living longer. And so that becomes a very big concern, a very, very big fear of senior homeowners. The HECM loan, including this line of credit feature, is exactly targeted toward that situation.
That's great. Well, here's a Home Safe Second.
Yeah. And again, with this one, you're going to do this if you want to keep that 2.5% mortgage and you're able to make that payment. That's important to note. And you need the money today. And you need it for a specific purpose, I'll add. That's usually why these are done, is because you have the need for money now, and it's for a specific purpose. Your monthly cash flow after you get the loan is still important. So the opportunity to not make a payment can be very attractive if making the payment on the second will be financially challenging to you. So this gives you that opportunity to preserve your cash flow at a lower level so that you can live comfortably, even though you've accessed what could, in a lot of cases, be a significant amount of money through this program. And again, it's for you, the homeowner who does not want to refinance or replace your current mortgage because that rate is so low. Now, if you're at 4.5% or 5%, or heck, if you bought a home just 3 years ago and you're at 6 or 6.5%, different story. But when you have that low rate mortgage and you're able to pay it, then the Home Safe Second is the perfect solution.
I love that. So let me paint one scenario before we go. So as an example, let's say I were that senior homeowner and I bought it 3 years ago and it is at 6%, and I have equity because I made a large down payment, but now the payments are starting to be a little bit of an issue. Is a line of credit like we're talking about, or because it's going to replace that higher or that first, and now I don't have to make those payments? Is that an option?
Exactly right. Because you could have somebody, and particularly in this valley, because we get a lot of folks who sell their home and retire and move out to the Coachella Valley, to Palm Springs and other cities. And, a lot of times they think, oh, I'm going to pay cash after I sell my home. And believe it or not, sometimes they come up short and they're not able to quite go cash when they come out here to retire. So they may buy, $1 million home, but they have to get a, $250,000 mortgage. Well, 3 or 4 years ago, they did that. They have that rate at 6 or 6.5, might be even 7. And now they're at a point where, that's a little uncomfortable. Well, they have enough equity from when they first bought, and now it's probably grown since then, that getting a reverse mortgage, not the Home Safe Second, but getting the HECM loan that includes that line of credit, perfect solution. Because depending on how old they are, and if they're up there in the years, they can pay off that 6% mortgage because it's a small amount compared to what they bought the home for, plus the value's gone up. They can get rid of that 6%, 7% mortgage, eliminate the payment. There's probably going to be money left over. Set it up in that line of credit. You're not paying interest on it or making incurring interest on it. You don't have to make a payment on it because it's zero balance and it's growing over time. Why wouldn't you do that?
Yeah,
I mean, that's a perfect solution.
Art, what a great conversation today. I know we went a little long, but the details, that's where the magic is in the details. And knowing that they have two ways to do this is very beneficial. I'm going to bug out. I'm going to say thank you, but you can tell us how people can follow from here.
Okay, sounds good. Thanks, Jeff. Yeah, in closing, what I want to let everybody know is the biggest takeaway is that senior homeowners often have options that younger homeowners do not. A traditional HELOC or equity loan may make sense in certain situations. But for homeowners who are older, in that 55 to 62 years plus or older range, the reverse mortgage product offers distinct advantages, especially when cash flow, retirement planning, and preserving your existing mortgage terms, in those cases, is important to you. So the right solution isn't about accessing the most equity. It's about accessing equity in the way that best supports your long-term financial goals. It should not be considered a product for last resort. You should look at it strategically as a tool to position yourself to enjoy your retirement years. And I'll leave you with this, a perfect way to think about it. Younger homeowners typically qualify based on income. Senior homeowners often qualify based on equity. So with these products, we can show you how that works. So with that, I'm going to conclude this week's Mortgage Minute. I want to thank you all for listening and watching Mortgage Minute. Have an enjoyable weekend. Hope you enjoy watching the French Open, the NBA playoffs. Let's see if San Antonio can break the Knicks' 12-game win streak. And of course, if you can, I think it's on Apple TV. Check out that Formula One Grand Prix in Monaco. It's a very nice event, one of the most important, most popular motor racing events in the world. So with that, enjoy your weekend, and I'll see you next week on the next edition of the Mortgage Minute. So long. Take care.